is hoping to secure the first 30 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccines by signing a contract with developers, hopefully by the end of the year. By 2021, government expects the arrival of 60 million doses that will be distributed to local governments and the private sector. But how should the private sector and government coordinate a national vaccine program? We will discuss that in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to this special edition of The Chiefs. Joining me this evening is Dr. Jaime Montoya of the DOST's Philippine Council for Health Research and Development, or PCHRD. Good evening, Dr. Montoya.
Yeah, good evening, Robbie. Good evening.
Okay. Let's start with updates. Ay updates on the vaccine front and yung mga inaasahan ng mga ating mga kabayan. As we said, we have 10 days to go before the end of the year. What can they look forward to, and what are the remaining questions heading into 2021?
Well, first of all, there are a lot of developments now. In the US, 2 are already approved for emergency use authorization. That's Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna. This has an effect on our negotiations here in the Philippines because most likely this will be the 2 front runners as far as registration approval or EUAs are concerned here in the Philippines. Because as you probably would understand, we can only make the supplies available in the Philippines once the FDA approves this vaccine. So that is why these 2 vaccines being frontliners, because they have recently approved EUAs in the US, are already part of the formal negotiations being done by the team led by Secretary Galvez.
Okay. So when you say it will affect us, it means we have more options. We can now look at these 2. But what about in terms of, so susundan lang natin yung sa FDA. We'll take that as a good sign. We'll take that as somewhat reassuring for us. We rely on their science and their protocols as well. But what about when it comes to access? When it comes to our number in the line, as it were.
Well, if you're talking about the actual deployment and use of the vaccines, there is actually a national prioritization plan that's already prepared, led by the Department of Health. And they've actually identified already the priority groups that will be vaccinated when they are available, because you all know that the supplies are limited, so we really have to prioritize. And definitely the frontliners, the healthcare workers, will be in the first category, generally speaking, followed by the other categories like the senior citizens and the people with comorbidities or underlying illnesses.
Okay. No, but we also want to know about the Philippines' place in having access to these. What the Moderna entering the picture as having been cleared by the FDA in the US, does that have a different timeline from what we're expecting from Pfizer, for example, in terms of when we might expect those vaccines to actually be available here? And what is the volume? What's the number that we're talking about for both? And for that matter, as being programmed for the entire Philippines for 2021?
Yeah. Well, the numbers for each of those possible suppliers, I cannot give you that information as of now because these are all being negotiated. But what I can tell you is, for example, for Moderna, it's actually a small company. So it cannot be able to produce vaccines as much as probably Pfizer. So definitely Moderna, if ever our negotiations push through with them, will only be available second half of next year. Pfizer is also the same. However, there is a possibility that Pfizer can be earlier in terms of availability. Again, that's part of the negotiation. And we all know that Pfizer is upscaling its production. So depending on the negotiation, it may be available maybe second quarter of next year if the negotiations push through. And the EUAs, of course, come in from our FDA.
Okay. So we're expecting second half of next year. This is for the first batch. This is for the first
Yeah.
batch for the
And by
frontliners.
the way, we're also part of the COVAX facility, which you're all familiar with. So in
Mm.
COVAX facility, they're giving us for sure at least 15% of our national demand, and 3% of which will be for the healthcare workers. That's the first tranche, and it's supposed to be allocated February of next year. So maybe it will be available March or second quarter of next year. So that's from
Mm.
the COVAX facility, but that's only about roughly 3 million people, which are actually the healthcare workers and the other priority groups, to be followed by the second tranche, maybe at the first half of 2022. So that's another source that we can actually rely on based on the agreements that we're actually finalizing.
Okay. Now, as you said, Moderna was the big news today, having been cleared by the U.S. But let's do a roundup of all the other vaccine candidates out there. AstraZeneca, where is that? And for that matter, Sinovac and the Gamaleya.
Yeah. Well, all of this, for example, AstraZeneca has already filed an EUA with the Medical Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency of the UK, and also for EMEA in Europe. And Gamaleya was also awaiting its EUA from Russia, and the same thing with Sinovac and Sinopharm from the Chinese FDA. So all of
Mm.
this, once the EUAs are approved by the respective countries, will have an influence on how we will actually approve, at least the
Mm.
FDA will approve the vaccines in the Philippines.
Sir, linawin ko lang po yun. No? It will have an influence how it is certified by the respective FDAs in the different countries. Yung, yung, yung EUA po ba, and for that matter, yung FDA of the respective countries, do we look at them equally in parity with each other? For example, ang EUA sa China, EUA sa Russia, do we look at that with the same degree of confidence as we would consider an EUA from the UK or the United States?
Yeah, generally speaking, the FDAs follow a list of, they have a tiered evaluation of countries coming up with approvals. We have such a thing as SRAs, or what we call stringent regulatory authorities. There's a list of what these SRAs are. So these are countries where in their process of evaluation are certified and compliant with international guidelines. And of course, when the SRAs are the ones that issue the EUAs, it will have a strong bearing or basis for our review process here in the Philippines.
So, sino po ang nagsicertify? That's WHO, for example. Who
Well,
certifies on
WHO
the
has
global level?
a listing of what we call
Mm.
stringent regulatory authorities. So that's also a
Mm-mm.
point of reference. It's because the WHO has an oversight function among most of these regulatory authorities.
Okay. So, but this is to say that, if you have the SRA, I don't know if I'm using this term right, but if you have the highest certified stringency in your standards, mas kampante tayo doon. No, I'm just curious,
Yeah,
where do
of
those
course.
countries rank? US, I presume,
But
is
yeah, but
there. Mm.
yeah. I said it has a big bearing on the decision of
Mm.
the FDA, but it's not necessarily an automatic approval.
Mm.
Now, why do I
Mm.
say that? Because the FDA also has other criteria to consider. For
Mm.
example, logistics. Maybe it's a very good vaccine, but if the logistics would require, sophisticated cold chain equipment, etc., maybe it will think twice. But of course, when you look at FDA approvals, they just make sure that the vaccines will be available in the market, and which of these vaccines will be actually chosen by government to be part of its national program for immunization will also be following or evaluating using a set of criteria which includes logistics and other factors.
Other factors including safety and efficacy, I
Yes, of
presume.
course,
So
of
if
course.
for example, on the other side of your example, logistically, uy, mukhang mas madali ito. We don't need as cold as storage and so on. But on the other hand, we don't have the assurance necessarily on the level of efficacy and safety. That also will, that will also count in the point system.
Yeah, but it will not be approved by the FDA if it has unreliable
Uh,
safety and efficacy data. So that's already a given. Once it is approved by the FDA, we are sure that it is safe and effective based on the available data. And maybe the other considerations will come into play when the government decides which of these will be made available through our national vaccine program. And that will, of course, as I said, include logistics, transport requirements, requirements for trained personnel, etc.
Okay, now Dr. Montoya, of course, malaking balita rin po ngayon, this new strain coming out of the UK, a lot of European countries and North American countries have already banned travel to and from the United Kingdom. I understand the Philippines is considering that as well. Like, what do we know about this new strain of coronavirus in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, first of all, as most virologists would say, we expect that to happen because viruses really mutate and change their genetic structure. Usually depends whether it be a minor or a major change. It actually undergoes this process as more and more people become infected. And this is basically a response mechanism of the virus to evade the immune system or the antibodies produced by people who are infected. So what has been reported in the UK, which is the sudden increase in cases in the southeastern part of England, is actually attributed to a new variant, which is different from the one that emerged in Europe, the D614G.
Mm.
And actually, it's already labeled as a VIU, virus under VUI, virus under investigation, variant under investigation. So we have to monitor it closely. They're monitoring it closely. So far, what we know is that it produces, it's more infectious. So it actually, transmission is faster. But apparently, it is not producing increased morbidity or mortality. So in other words, nakakahawa siya, mas nakakahawa, pero hindi naman siya mas dumadami ang komplikasyon o mas nakamamatay compared sa circulating strain now.
Yeah, I read a news item earlier, a big story, and I don't know if I remember this correctly, but there was also this detail that they suspect it might be more infectious with children in particular.
Well, they're still looking at that based on they're still doing disaggregating. They are disaggregating the data and finding out whether, in fact, it is more infectious among children. But we'll await the analysis that will be forthcoming.
Yeah. Okay, now Dr. Montoya, of course, ito yung tanong lahat ng tao. We're looking for reassurance. What does this all mean for all our candidate vaccines? Does it change the game? Are we back to square one? Do we know which vaccines will work against this new strain? Panibagong headache ba to?
Well, I don't think it will have a major impact on the vaccines. For example, many of the vaccines or some of the vaccines are now being developed, actually already incorporated the variants that were initially identified in Europe, this D614G. And apparently the antibody response is still good. So I suppose the effect will still be the same with this new variant. But as I was saying, we still have to monitor closely the developments. That is why it's very important to follow up these patients who will be given the vaccines, especially now in the US, in the UK, and hopefully in the Philippines, to find out whether it's truly protective, whether they will be prone to reinfection. No, because if, for example, it doesn't provide protection, then maybe you recover, they develop an infection, they recover, but it's not complete. So they get reinfected again. That's another possibility. So we have to follow up all of these patients and see what will happen.
Yeah, but Doc, when it comes to vaccines and, for example, flu shots, we know people have to take flu shots regularly. We know that we already deal with mutations regularly. So is this par for the course? As you said, we did factor in the possibility and the likelihood of mutations. How does that work? And what does that mean also for the production and the, I don't know, updating of vaccines per year?
Well, what we know so far, again, about the basic biology of the virus, it does not mutate as fast as the influenza virus or even by its predecessor, the SARS coronavirus 1 in 2003, or even the colds, the coronavirus causing common colds. It doesn't mutate as fast as these viruses. So that's one sign of relief for us, because if it doesn't mutate that fast, then we only foresee changes after a long period of time. But still, there is a possible mutation. But, you know, because its rate of mutation is not as fast as the other viruses, maybe it will be less frequent and the changes may be minor and not major as compared to the other viruses. So we really have to monitor the behavior of the virus. But as far as we know, the virus mutation rate is not as fast as the other viruses.
Okay, now Dr. Montoya, in the meantime, as we keep saying, we're looking at probably second quarter of next year, whether that's earlier in the quarter or later in the quarter. But the point is we still have a few months to go before we even see a first tranche of the vaccines, and it's going to be a small as percentage of our population na muna. What do we do in the meantime? I mean, our, your
Well,
Christmas message in
yes,
particular to our people, what do we do in the meantime?
we don't have to, we shouldn't put down our guard. We should
Mm.
continue to be vigilant, to practice minimum health standards, physical distancing, use of face masks, face shields, and, you know, personal hygiene. That will still continue even with the introduction of the vaccine. We shouldn't bring down our guard, because the vaccine is only part of the comprehensive strategy for controlling this particular infection. So we still have to maintain that, especially now or during the period that the vaccine is not yet available. And even if the vaccine becomes available, it also takes time to develop for us to develop a response if we respond to it. So we have to bear that in mind. So we really have to be very vigilant and still maintain what we're currently doing now.
Yeah, I think you've emphasized that, and that's a very important point. No? Lahat ba ito ng vaccines, all of these candidate vaccines will be having more than one dose, ganun ba yun?
No, there are some vaccines that are actually will only have one dose, but some of them are still in phase 3 clinical trials. They're not yet finished. Some of them are in early phase 2, so we still have to wait. But there are vaccines in the pipeline that will require just a single dose.
But among other things that we still do not know, correct me if I'm wrong, is we do not necessarily know whether it's one dose or two doses, how long the effective inoculation period is going to be.
Yes. Well, there are certain vaccines that will really require just one dose, but we don't know whether it will be given every year or every 2, every 3 years. It really depends on the follow-up period wherein we'll see how the antibodies will behave, how high the antibody levels are, and how long they will last to confer protection to the vaccinees.
Now, Doc, medyo related doon sa tanong ko kanina, no, what do we need to do? And you've reminded, health protocols, we're not helpless. No, we know what to do. We know how to behave.
Yes.
We've demonstrated that. And so, but, people are on social media. And we can't help it. Naiingit tayo. We saw the shipment come in sa Singapore. We're bracing ourselves na, nako, ito na,
Yeah.
sunod-sunod na ang mga headlines. Bawat country, nakapila na. They're getting their shipments. More than asking, what do we do? I want to ask you,
Yeah,
how
but
should we
remember,
feel? Kasi sa totoo lang, naiinggit yung mga Pilipino sa ibang bansa.
I know.
How should we
And
feel?
we're very
What should be our...
hopeful that vaccines will be available as soon as possible time. But remember, one advantage also of this delay is that we'll get to see what will happen with those countries. If we do it very early on, then we don't know what will happen. But if they go ahead, we can actually observe, and now we're seeing it. So for Pfizer, for example, although there are isolated reports, not many, of cases of anaphylaxis, for example, severe sensitivity reactions. and we have that benefit. But if you're
Mm.
already in the midst of the vaccination program, then you just have to deal with them.
Okay. Dr. Jaime Montoya of the DOST's Philippine Council for Health Research and Development. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Robbie. Thank you very much.
And Merry Christmas, sir.
Merry Christmas as well.
We'll need to take a break. Please stay with me. The Chiefs will be right back. Welcome back, the Chiefs. We're in the final stage of this episode. With us now is psychologist Riyan Portuguez.
Hello, good evening.
Hello. Am I pronouncing it right?
Hi.
Riyan or Ryan? How should I pronounce it?
Rian. It's
Riyan, hi.
Rian. Yeah.
Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. We of course invited you here because today in the past 2 days a lot of people have been concerned about this viral video. Very tragic, very disturbing. Also, to the point that not to get into the specifics necessarily of that incident, but to the point that a lot of people are saying, "Uy, trigger warning naman. Huy, kailangan naman natin ng konting discussion about the fallouts here, not just for the people concerned, but for the people precisely like us and our children watching these videos." Your thoughts, first of all, when you saw that video as a psychologist, what was your concern?
Well, actually, to be honest, I actually watched the video without trigger warning. So,
Hmm.
parang I was outside, and then when I go back dito sa room ko, sabi ko, anong trending na to? So, I click in the video without trigger warning. So, and then after a few seconds, I was really surprised. Hindi actually surprised, actually shocked ako dun sa nakita ko. And napasigaw talaga ako dun sa nakita ko, and nagpalpitate talaga yung puso ko. Even ako na mental health professional, I don't have mental health concerns na as of now. Talaga yung panginginig and yung mismong na-encounter ko, sobrang bigat. So I also thought of parang my clients and even those people na may mental health concern na what more yung na-encounter nila kung nakita nila yung video without trigger warning. So I think it's
Hmm.
also important na mag-include tayo ng trigger warning kasi it also prepare those people na may mental health concern. Though we have mixed results when it comes to trigger warning. There are research na nagsasabi na there is little or no benefit at all if we put trigger warning. But there are people pa rin naman, debatable pa din siya as of this moment, there are people na nagkiklaim din talaga na it's actually helpful for them para ma-prepare sila kung kaya ba nilang panoorin or not yung video na yun. Kasi they can actually ask someone na makasama para panoorin yung video. Kasi yung nagiging results natin when it comes to trigger warning, sinasabi nila na no benefit or little lang yung benefit niya. Kasi most of the time, those people na nanonood or nakaka-encounter ng trigger warning, they tend to avoid the video. So it's like hindi na sila.
But Rian, I mean, the benefit, there might be still some academic debate over it, but it doesn't do any harm to have a trigger warning.
Yes, better. Actually, mas okay pa rin kahit paano na meron tayong trigger warning kasi nga, most people, they find it helpful. They find it helpful and it also prepares them psychologically. So, good pa din yun.
Okay, now I think it's a fairly common term. I have to confess, I have an idea what it is. I know some friends who deal with mental health issues, who see their therapists, who have interventions. Some don't. But doon ko unang nakikita yon. To be honest, sa social media ko unang nakita yon. I don't even remember when. But trigger warning, oh, wala man lang trigger warning. Oh, na-trigger ako, and so on. And it's a fairly common term. But explain to us, what is it? What's for people with no mental health issues who may not be aware that they have, or for people who have but don't know what it is? What exactly does a trigger mean? And for that matter, what does a trigger warning mean?
So when we say trigger warning or content warning, especially dun sa mga videos and posts, no, they actually put the trigger warning or content warning to prepare the audience or the viewers about a particular post na merong triggering or distressing or upsetting content. So for example, yung content halimbawa na video na merong rape na content. So for those people na may rape, parang na-encounter or na-experience, lalo na nagkaroon ng PTSD because of that particular experience, no, may iwasan nila na panoorin yung video at mape-prepare din sila na huwag ma-trigger. So for people na naka-encounter ng war shock halimbawa, tapos yung video ay may content na medyo connected sa war shock, so may iwasan nila kahit paano or mape-prepare sila doon sa particular na content na yon. And yun nga, usually nakakatulong siya kung meron kang kasama kapag papanoorin mo yon at meron siyang trigger warning. Or pwede rin na huwag mo muna panoorin because it's something na pwedeng re-traumatizing, kumbaga marirelieve yung experience. And it's really difficult to manage kapag na-relieve yung experience or na-re-traumatize ka because of that particular
I guess that's the more basic question I have, di ba? Yung re-traumatizing. What's that? When you're triggered and you're dealing with something, when you're triggered, what exactly does that mean? What's the experience? You get re-traumatized. You said it's as if you're reliving a past trauma, or I mean, how does it manifest in people?
Yes, for people with PTSD, so pwedeng magkaroon sila ng specific na flashbacks na parang nangyari ulit sa kanila yung experience na yon. They could also they experience differently. They experience differently. So there are people na naghihirapan huminga, they have chest pain, palpitations, yung fast din na parang breathing nila. And iba cold sweat, so there are different manifestations, no, pero yun yung parang usually na nag-appear, no, nare-traumatize sila na parang bumabalik ulit yung previous na experience nila.
But a past experience is the premise here. You can't get triggered, let's say, moving forward kahit wala akong trauma prior to this. I mean, there's no such thing as sobrang violent yon and I'm triggered to have my first trauma or moving forward. In other words, the premise to the trigger here is there was a past experience.
Yeah, usually, yeah, I agree. You may past experience. So pero ito yung pinaka-point natin, even if you don't have that parang previous experience, it's still distressing yung term naman natin for those people na walang mental health concern. It's upsetting and distressing na mapanood mo siya, talagang yung rage, yung specific emotions na mag-appear, it's valid. So kaya talagang mas mahirap din sa feeling kahit ikaw ay walang previous experience.
Now, of course, we're just to remind people watching in, we're talking about this obviously because of that viral video that we looked at with Officer Nuesca in Panay Tarlac. But we're also discussing this because that's not the first violent and disturbing video that all of us have seen. Riyan, I don't know if your experience is the same as mine, but I woke up. Some people deliberately did not want to post the video. Thank God for that. But at the same time, it left enough clues that I guess, like you, it made me wonder what's going on, di ba? So I go to Facebook, I try to guess at the keywords. I Google killing, two people, Philippines. I go through Google News. I look at Twitter, what's trending. But kasi Rian, why did I do that? Why do we do that? You know, we don't want distressing videos, disturbing videos, and yet why do a lot of people actively look for this, knowing that I'm gonna regret this?
Okay, so basically, since it's trending, so most of us are actually urged to look for that particular trend, no? May fear of missing out on our end. Kasi syempre, social media kasi, talagang na-expose na tayo. So there are people tulad natin minsan na fear of missing out. Ano yung trending? So out of curiosity, sinearch mo siya. So ganon, kaya din natin siya, kaya may urge din tayo, natatakot. Somehow, meron tayong fear na baka ma-miss out natin itong pangyayari or gusto ko maging updated. So out of curiosity, you search for that particular incident. Pero yun, hindi naman din helpful na mag-over pathologize tayo dun sa behavior natin. Pero basically, it's out of curiosity why we are doing it. No?
Mm.
Ayan.
It's not a fascination with anything morbid or ano. Is there anything about morbid stuff that inherently as human beings we're actually wired to seek out and to see? Because I know also a lot of people who were curious and were disciplined enough to stay away from this video na they make a decision. I'm not going to look at this. I know the issue. I think I understand what's going on. And I even have my own judgment about it without seeing it. And then there are those naman na hindi, kailangan ko mapanood. Why are there two different kinds of responses to this?
Well, people have different interests. So there are people who are fascinated by morbid na mga videos or kaya nga may mga iba't iba tayong hilig, di ba? There are people na gusto ng mga horror, gusto ng suspense, gusto ng action. So it lies with doon sa mga differences na gusto din natin. So, pero meron tayong mga specific explanation na there are people daw na wired nga daw din doon sa mga aggressive. May mga ganon. Pero that is medyo, makalumang mga studies na yun eh. Pero I would like to think that it all boils down with our interest din. Pwedeng fascinated ka, particularly sa mga ganong klase ng situation.
Okay. Now, of course, we're also looking. We're another contention and controversy arising from this particular video sa Paniki Tarlac is of course the matter of the child in the video.
Yeah.
And now a lot of people are bullying the poor girl. Even the father of the victim, Mr. Gregorio, has been calling on the public, please, wag naman natin i-bully yung bata. Talk to us about that as well. I mean, the fallout from this, what do people need to understand? Not just about bullying, but also people were genuinely perplexed when they were looking at this child. They were trying to read into the mind of this child. Did she flinch? Was this common to her? Hindi siya umiyak, hindi siya tumakbo. Do we necessarily have knowledge or even right to think that we know what was going on in that child's mind?
Yes. Thank you for that question kasi I encountered that question, ano daw masabi ko dun sa bata, no? Kasi hindi nga daw nag-flinch. And I think yung child na yon, she needs psychological support, she needs counseling. And it's a horrifying incident that's too much for anyone, especially din sa kanya. We react differently eh. We react differently. So there are people na outside, pwedeng ganun yung response niya, pero inside, iba pala yung impact sa kanya. And I know, no, yun yung in-argue ng iba na parang, okay, hindi siya flinch. Pero yon, if ever, kunwari na hindi nga siya nag-flinch, that's problematic, di ba, kung hindi nga siya nag-flinch. Ibig sabihin, there's something that we need to process dun sa bata na yun. Baka kailangan din niya ng attention or psychological processing kasi we don't want anyone or children to learn that it's okay to be aggressive and violent when it comes to dealing with those kinds of situation, di ba? Kumbaga nano-normalize natin yung aggression and yung mismong violence. And ayaw natin mangyari yan sa kahit na sinong bata. So kung yun yung parang nangyari sa kanya na parang hindi siya nag-flinch, parang normal sa kanya yun, ibig sabihin kailangan niya ng attention. And there's a lot of parang thing na pwede nating magawa para sa bata na yun, para mag-develop siya into a healthy and mature adult. Kasi bata pa siya, meron pa siyang chance and meron pang hope. And let's spare the child kasi yung situation na yon, ang dapat talagang mag-manage dun ay yung adult, yung father. Siya yung father. So maaaring yes, na-trigger siya, pero father siya eh. Siya yung mas mayroong control dun sa situation. At ang bata, hindi naman sila talaga totally in control sa mga ganong klase ng situation. Mas mataas yung rational and objective na functioning ng isang mature na adult, diba? So, let's spare the child.
What about the other adults? I mean, the overwhelming number of adults here, other than the perpetrator, other than Mr. Nuesca, and other than the victims. I'm talking about us, the people on social media. I see these comments on Twitter. Most of them I don't know. I mean, I'm happy to say I haven't seen people close to me reacting that way. But the commentary on social media, if you were to presume that those were adults, speak to those adults. How would you process the more disturbing reactions on social media, particularly dragging this child as a co-conspirator here?
Mhm. So for those adults na nagre-react na aggressively or nagpo-promote ng hate against that kid or ng child na yon, no? I think we should stop kasi ayun na nga eh, 'di ba? Yung nangyari, it's a horrifying incident. It's really something na too much na sa atin as adult, paano pa doon sa children. Hate, 'di ba? Hate, hostility, toxic na yung nangyari. And then hindi natin actually mapopromote yung culture ng love, compassion, and respect kung ang
Mhm.
binabato din natin actually ay the same thing. So hindi natin pwedeng ma-create yung ganung culture by also doing the same thing. So ayaw natin na syempre ma-observe tayo ng mga bata or ng mga netizens na bata na ganyan tayo mag-handle ng type of situation. So as mature adults, ang kailangan natin ipakita yung maging role model din tayo eventually na okay, it's okay actually to express your anger, to express
Mm.
your disappointment, your frustration. That's okay. Pero to target a kid, that's not right. Okay, that's not
Mm.
right. Kasi as mature adults, we are expected na mas may alam tayo dun sa situation na yon. So, ayun, let's stop promoting yung culture ng hate and yung culture ng cyberbullying kasi minor din siya at marami pa siyang pwedeng gawin, marami pa nag-aantay sa kanya na para maging mature adult din siya. So yan, at
Okay.
na-observe din tayo ng mga children. Okay.
I mean, since you were there, we're talking about the wider society and more people beyond the people that we could see in that video. You talked kanina about trauma. No, we talked about trigger, and that involves people who experience past trauma and so on. And you also said for those who did not necessarily experience trauma, you're talking about being disturbed, being distressed, being traumatized per se by
Mm.
what you see. So another effect. What about the effect of because as I said, we want to talk about beyond this one video and
Mm.
the countless videos that we've all seen now of violence. What about the effect of being desensitized to this violence? I get the sense that in some countries it's easier for them to be outraged by you know by 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 scenes of violence, whereas tayo parang sanay tayo. We see death, we see people dying in floods, we see people harming each other. Is there that effect as well from all of these videos and images we see on social media that on a larger scale your patient that is the entire society could be generating a a culture that is more desensitized to violence and hurt?
Yeah. Yes, apparently merong impact yung gano'n, no? It's like we are normalizing yung aggression, yung hate, yung ganong klase ng mga ano. And yun nga, kaya part din talaga nito when we are checking on post, yung mga videos na yon, we need to ground ourselves dun sa reality. What we see in social media are not actually normal. Ito yung mga extreme cases na encounter natin all over the world, no? Kaya kailangan natin na-examine yung self natin kasi if we are to adapt yung ganitong klase ng situation, yung maging aggressive, maging hostile, maging unhealthy tayo when it comes to dealing with this situation. Hindi natin nare-resolve yung issues natin as a mature adult eh. So nanonormalize siya and hindi healthy na maging habitual reaction natin parate kapag negative yung isang bagay ay maging hostile tayo toward another person. So yes, may impact yung social media. So for those netizens na nanonood ngayon nga, as much as possible, we need to examine our thoughts, our emotions, ourselves, na lahat na nakikita natin sa social media, ito yung mga extreme cases at hindi siya totally normal. As an adult, na ganito tayo mag-approach sa mga problem.
I mean, Rian, you're used to dealing with patients one at a time. You have this platform to talk to everybody watching right now. What would you recommend? How should we handle content like this? I mean, when you have an idea that okay, this is going to be troubling, you feel strongly about it. You do want to say something about it. We're not judging that part. But how should people handle it? Should we continue to share these videos? Is it enough to share it with these trigger warnings as has been suggested, or should we totally avoid sharing things like this?
Hmm. Well, we should be responsible enough when it comes to sharing. So if you want to share something like this, na better na wag na yung video, pwedeng siguro yung parang educational post, no? May trigger warning tapos educational post because there are different ways kasi to educate people without posting yung original video kasi nga mas nakaka-trigger din siya. Kahit yung mga specific contents lang na pwede nilang matutunan. And we can also share helpful articles para maging mentally healthy sila in times like this. Ayan, ano ba yung pwede nilang gawin? For example, kung matrigger sila or magkaroon sila ng upsetting feeling or magkaroon sila ng distressing feeling. So, ayun, yun yung mga ilan sa pwede nilang gawin. Yeah. Or kung ikaw naman, for example, naka-encounter ng mismong upsetting situation, it's okay to take mental health break. It's okay to reduce social media consumption kasi one of the main stressors talaga natin ngayon ay yung social media. So it's okay to reduce social media consumption. You have to practice self-care. And also it's okay to talk to someone, to your friends and loved ones, or even try to maximize yung hotline crisis natin para naman maging okay din tayo. Or okay din mag-consult tayo ng mental health professional for us to handle yung mga overwhelming na mga nararanasan natin ngayon.
Okay, Rian, I'll take that as an opportunity to zoom out a bit and talk about, as you said, this particular moment in time. You know, one of the things that I thought nung nakita ko yung video na yan and everybody was talking about it, really, what you get the reaction of, oh my God, 2020, parang this just reminds us na hindi pa tapos. Isang linggo na lang matatapos na to 2020. We're all still stuck in COVID. We're all still stuck in, we're trying to get out and yet we're getting the message, wag muna, dyan muna. Uh, Throughout this whole year, as you see people struggling with quarantine and being isolated from their loved ones, how would you how would you frame the best way we can approach this Christmas season right now and frame ourselves for 2021?
Okay, so we should stop being complacent na wala ng COVID. Kasi again, even 2021 man yan, hindi ibig sabihin na, okay, parang magic na nawala na din si COVID. Ano? So, stop being complacent na wala na yung COVID. We need to still follow the safety protocols pa din, yung social distancing, face mask, face shield, etc. Kasi when we follow the safety protocols, somehow may psychological impact din siya sa atin na we feel secure and we parang have a sense of control sa nangyayari. Kasi alam natin na napoprotect natin yung sarili natin, even yung loved ones natin or yung friends din natin by following the safety protocols, no? And also, yun nga, uncertainty pa rin yung ilan sa mga kalaban natin because of COVID. So kung meron kayo na-encounter na uncertainty feeling and then yung feelings of loss pa din, ayun, it's okay pa rin na i-continue pa din natin yung mga sinasuggest namin na, yun, consult yung mental health professional. Kung meron tayong uncertainty na nafe-feel, it's helpful for us to set specific goals or yung mga short-term goals lang para magkaroon tayo ng sense of direction. Ano ba yung mga gusto nating i-try for ourselves para naman meron tayong gawin. So, pwede natin gawin yung mga self-care na mga activities para patuloy pa din tayo na kumbaga nagiging okay physically and mentally, and also try to follow or try to look for alternatives din ng mga hindi nyo pa natatry ng mga self-care activities. Kumbaga, yun pa rin hindi natin totally makokontrol yung mundo. Ang kaya lang natin actually kontrolin kahit sa 2021, yung response natin dito sa problem natin, ourselves, so yung ating thoughts, ang ating behavior. So, yun.
Pero Rian, I think message loud and clear naman. It's okay to be hopeful. It's okay to try to keep your spirits up, but also manage your expectations kasi nandyan pa rin, hindi pa rin tayo makakabalik sa opisina. You're still going to be largely stuck in your home. Pero can I just say this on behalf of everyone? Pagod na ako, Rian. Pagod na ako 2020, and I'm looking forward to the new year to signal to me that it is a new year. I do think that there are things that now I can plan for. COVID is no longer unexpected as it was in the start of 2020. Pero I want to be hopeful, period. Pagod na ako. Now you're telling me 2021, konting antay pa. And now I'm thinking yung konting antay, baka 1 quarter, 2 quarters, baka still the whole of 2021. What will you tell me as your patient? I'm coming to you as your patient. Pagod na ako. I just want 2021 to be all about hope, to be all about but I know it's not and just thinking of 2021, lalo pa ako napapagod. Anong gagawin ko, Rian?
Mm. So yun, yung feeling is actually valid. So ako, as someone na nakikinig sa isang tao na ganyan, pagod na daw siya. So try to recognize, honor your emotion. Okay, so napapagod ka. So ano ba ginagawa natin kapag napapagod natin? We need to refuel ourselves, di ba? May mga times kasi kung bakit nagpa-pile up din kasi yung ating burnout. Kasi usually pinipilit natin yung sarili natin maging happy. Alam mo yun, fake happiness, toxic positivity. Kaya mas lalo nababurden din tayo doon kasi we are denying what we really feel. No? So, start tayo by honoring our emotions. You're not okay, you're exhausted, you need to take a break. It's okay to feel yung mga negative emotions na to. Doon kasi nagsa-start yung mismong healing, yung processing, yung mismong pagbabago, little by little. So if you keep on denying yung mga negative emotions na to, magpa-pile up lang siya. Ang nangyayari, nagkakaroon tayo ng suffering, and suffering ay nagre-result ng pain plus non-acceptance. Painful yung nangyayari sa'yo dahil ang daming nawala sa'yo, di ba? Pero the mere fact na you deny that pain, dinedenay mo yung mga losses na meron ka, lalong nangyayari yung suffering. So try to honor your emotions first. So alam mo meron kang problema, alam mo pagod ka, you need to take a break. Doon pa lang magsa-start yon. And alam mo yon, actually kulang tong pinag-uusapan natin kasi yung sinasabi natin honoring your emotions, it's a process eh. Kung paano talaga siya matutulungan na ma-honor yung emotions niya kasi madali siyang gawin pero mahirap siyang i-process. So it's a step process. Be patient.
You said a line there na I think a lot of people can relate to, but I mean sa akin mismo medyo tumusok siya. You said fake happiness, and beyond that, toxic positivity. Positivity can be toxic?
Yes. Kasi when we say positivity, yung genuine optimism na tinutukoy natin, it's a healthy positivity if we also allow ourselves to experience yung mga nangyaring negative sa atin. Nagiging toxic positivity yan na nagli-lead sa burnout kapag kunwari yun nga feeling natin pagod tayo pero i-distract mo lang yung sarili mo. Gagawa ka lang ng mga bagay na hindi mo i-confront talaga yung nararamdaman mo na totoo. So kaya nagiging toxic. So you tend to reject all of those things that trigger negativity. Hindi siya helpful sa'yo. So, ang optimism talaga, or genuine optimism, dito talaga siya nangyayari. Yung pagiging positive natin, yung pagiging hope talaga natin, yung healthy, no? Yung alam mo meron kang problema, nararamdaman mo siya, pero alam mo yon, tinatry mo din i-maximize yung, okay, ito yung pain na nangyari sa akin, ito yung types of loss. How do I recover from this? Habang, alam mo, dinaramdam mo siya, kailangan mo kasi i-confront, kailangan mo kasi upuan yung emotions mo eh. Usually kasi people, they tend to avoid yung mga unpleasant emotions eh. So, we need to confront it. Kailangan mo i-confront yon, wag mong inanumbed, and at the same time, i-practice natin yung gratefulness exercises. Ano ba yung mga bagay na dapat tayo magpasalamat para mas ma-maximize natin yung genuine optimism. So that is.
So lahat yan, kumbaga lahat yan, magpakatotoo ka. As we say, as it's gone around. One, it's okay to not be okay. Kung nalulungkot ka, pagod ka, galit ka, hindi mo naintindihan ang nangyari, huwag kang magpanggap na hindi ka pagod, huwag kang magpanggap na hindi mo naintindihan ang nangyari. And on top of all of that, huwag kang magpanggap that everything's okay. That's what you're saying.
Yes. It's okay not to be okay, but staying that way for 2 weeks or more than 2 weeks, hindi yan okay, ha? Baka maging mental
Mm.
health concern yan, tapos maging overwhelming pa. Okay? So you have to do
Mm.
something to get out of that.
Okay, so you start with yourself. Rian Portuguez, I feel much better. I will, I'm still with everyone. Pagod na ako. But I feel much better talking to you. And I guess that's part of your point, di ba? Talk to someone, you're not alone, and I can guarantee you, I'll be the one to guarantee. Pare-pareho tayo nagdurusa. Pare-pareho tayong pagod na.
Yes. So we have to accept your situation, confront, honor your emotion, and it's okay to talk to someone, to mental health professionals.
Okay. Psychologist Rian Portuguez, maraming salamat and Merry Christmas, and we hope to see you in 2021.
Yes. Happy holidays.
Okay, and that's it for this edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News.
Good evening. We wrap up today with the latest news and stories in the sports world.